For most people, the Louvre is a tourist stop. For the French, it's something closer to a national altar. A former royal palace turned into a public treasure house, the Louvre is supposed to be the safest place on earth for art and history. It sits in the center of Paris and at the center of French identity. Monarchs lived there. Revolutions raged around it. Today, millions walk its halls every year under the unspoken assumption that nothing inside those walls can ever be touched. On a quiet Sunday morning in October, that belief lasted exactly 7 minutes. In those 7 minutes, a small crew in workmen's vests rode up to a second-story window of the Galerie d'Apollon, slipped inside one of the most secure rooms in Europe, and walked out with part of France's crown jewels. By noon, streets around the Louvre were sealed. News alerts hijacked every phone and TV screen in Paris. And the headline was the same everywhere. A perfectly executed jewel heist pulled off in broad daylight in a museum that was supposed to be untouchable. You're watching Obscure Crimes, the channel where we break down the heists, frauds, and investigations the rest of the world only half remembers. If you enjoy deep dive crime stories like this, hit subscribe, because what happened inside the Louvre that morning is stranger than fiction. This is how the most famous museum in the world got hit.
The Louvre has always carried an aura of being bulletproof. After all, this is a palace that survived revolutions, wars, and occupation. When it became a museum, it only gained another layer of armor. Over time, security around its masterpieces tightened like a noose. Cameras tucked into corners, doors controlled by electronic locks, guards walking timed routes, and a 24/7 command center watching every gallery. And the Louvre had already learned a painful lesson once before. Back in 1911, a handyman named Vincenzo Peruggia simply lifted the Mona Lisa off the wall, hid overnight in a broom closet, and walked out with the painting under his coat. The theft turned an obscure portrait into the most famous work of art on earth. After a 2-year search, the painting was recovered in Italy and brought back to Paris in triumph. That embarrassment reshaped everything. Security was redesigned. The museum slowly earned a reputation as a fortress you just didn't mess with. By the 21st century, the message was clear. If something priceless had to be protected, the Louvre was where you put it. Which is exactly why the place that was hit hurt so much. The heist took place in the Galerie d'Apollon, a long, ornate hall lined with golden mirrors, home to what's left of the French crown jewels. Tiaras, ceremonial crowns, elaborate necklaces. Not just gemstones, but symbols that once sat on the heads of emperors and empresses. This gallery isn't some quiet corner of the museum. It's in the inner ring, only a short walk, about 250 meters, from the Mona Lisa. On paper, it's the worst possible target for thieves. Thick, reinforced glass cases, vibration sensors on the displays, motion detectors in the ceiling, cameras everywhere, guards trained to watch crowds more than paintings. If you had to name the one room in Paris nobody would be insane enough to rob, it would be this one. Which is exactly why, when it finally happened, it felt less like a real crime and more like a scene ripped straight out of Ocean's 11. But here's the twist. There were no laser grids, no rappelling from the ceiling, no Hollywood-style hacker in a van. This job was brutally simple. A lift, a window, a saw, 7 minutes of controlled violence.
Whoever planned the theft knew the Louvre's rhythms. They picked Sunday morning, the museum's quietest point of the week. Fewer tourists at opening time meant fewer witnesses and, more importantly, slower reactions. On top of that, a construction project nearby gave them the perfect cover. In France, construction workers often wear bright yellow safety vests. So when several men in those same vests rolled up in a small basket lift truck near the Louvre Facade, nothing looked out of place. They positioned themselves close to an active work zone, far enough from the main guard patrols to avoid immediate attention, but close enough to the target window. That lift wasn't theirs. Investigators would later discover it had been rented 9 days earlier under a fake name. When the company delivered the truck, 2 masked men hijacked it on the spot. The thieves repainted the lift, changed its plates, and stored it until the right morning. By the time they drove it into position in front of the Louvre, it looked like just another piece of equipment on a busy Paris street. Around 9:30 a.m., the plan moved. 3 or 4 men stepped into the basket and began to rise along the stone exterior of the museum. heading toward a specific window on the second floor that opened into the Galerie d'Apollon. No one shouted, no one ran. From a distance, it looked like routine maintenance. Up close, it was a breach. The chosen window was old, but behind it lay millions of euros and jewels and the myth of an impregnable museum. Using a portable blowtorch and a compact saw, the crew forced the frame open. The noise blended with the sounds of the street below. Traffic, construction, tourists. It took only moments. Inside, motion detectors registered activity. Sensors noticed vibrations. Somewhere, an alarm indicator flipped from green to red. By then, the thieves were already in the room. They didn't wander or pause to admire the decor. They went straight toward two particular display cases, as if they'd walked this route a dozen times in their heads. Each man knew exactly which target he was responsible for. Then the quiet gallery exploded into mechanical noise. Battery-powered grinders screamed to life. Reinforced glass, designed to resist sledgehammers and blunt force, began to powder under the steady bite of spinning blades. Tiny shards clouded the air and fell like ground-up ice across the polished floor. A tourist's shaky cell phone recording, later leaked to the press, shows one of the thieves hunched over a case, sparks spraying in all directions as he cuts deep into the glass. At first, the few visitors in the room think it's some kind of renovation. Then they see the gloves, the masks, the speed. Within 4 to 7 minutes, the glass panels protecting France's royal heritage were no longer barriers. They were rubble. The crew knew exactly what they were reaching for. Among the pieces scooped up, a ceremonial crown, a tiara, a brooch worn by Empress Eugenie, wife of Napoleon III, and several other historic jewels. Rough estimates would later place the total value in the hundreds of millions of euros. All of this happened while alarms were blaring, and yet no one tackled them. No shots were fired. No guards rushed in with guns drawn. The decision the Louvre's staff made next would haunt them. When security saw the breach, they did what their protocols told them to do. They locked down the gallery and began evacuating visitors away from the threat. One tourist later recalled, "We were just about to go see the Mona Lisa when staff suddenly started shouting. They swept us out of the wing, down the stairs, and out the exit. We had no idea the entire museum was being emptied." From the Louvre's perspective, this made sense. Their priority was avoiding a hostage situation or a violent confrontation around priceless art. Confronting desperate thieves in a crowded hall, surrounded by glass and history, is every security director's nightmare. But that conservative choice came with a cost: time. Those extra minutes, the gap between the first alarm and the arrival of heavily armed police, were exactly what the thieves had budgeted for. Jewels in hand, they retraced their steps, moving back through the broken window and into the waiting basket. Another tourist clip, filmed from the street, later showed figures in yellow vests descending on the side of the building, one of them clutching a dark bag. No dramatic chase. No shootout. Just workmen coming down from a job. At street level, they stepped off the lift, crossed to the curb, and climbed onto two scooters idling with engines running. Within seconds, they were gone, disappearing into the morning traffic of Paris. Not everything went perfectly. Somewhere in that retreat, a 19th century crown was dropped or abandoned. It was later found by police in a nearby alley, bent and damaged, lying among trash bags and cigarette butts. It was the only piece recovered that day. Lockdown at the Louvre. Inside the museum, reality finally caught up. Entrances were sealed. Visitors were ordered out. By afternoon, the Louvre, usually a symbol of stability and continuity, was shut. Forensics teams moved in. They dusted the lift's controls for prints, collected fragments of glass and metal from the floor of the Galerie d'Apollon, and pulled hours of surveillance footage from cameras inside and outside the building. They had a timeline, but not much else. The lift had been stolen days before. The renters used a fake identity. Faces on the street cameras were covered with helmets or masks. The yellow vests worn during the heist were ditched. All that remained were the abandoned scooters, the lift truck, and a handful of grainy images showing men who could be almost anyone. Investigators quickly reached a conclusion. This wasn't the work of amateurs. An experienced crew had exploited a temporary construction site, museum routines, and the psychology of security staff to pull off a high-level smash and grab. From the last confirmed sighting, the scooters headed south, probably aiming to reach the ring roads and then the highway out of central Paris, and away from the heaviest police presence before roadblocks and alerts could fully snap into place. The first part of their plan worked. But in jewel theft, escaping the scene is only phase 1. Phase 2 is much harder, turning stolen history into money. France woke up that day to more than a robbery. It woke up to a bruise on national pride. Politicians lined up to condemn the heist. The president referred to it as an attack on French heritage. Opposition leaders called it a humiliation and a wound to the French soul. Worse, this wasn't an isolated incident. In the months leading up to the Louvre robbery, at least 2 other Parisian museums had been hit, including the National Museum of Natural History and the museum dedicated to former President Jacques Chirac. The pattern was clear. Someone had discovered vulnerabilities in France's cultural defenses, and they were exploiting them. Pressure on the police skyrocketed. The public wanted answers. The art world wanted its symbols back. But the clock was working against them. Pieces stolen from museums don't go straight to legitimate buyers. They can't. Their images are everywhere. Every auction house, major dealer, and art crime unit on Earth knows what they look like. No one is going to casually hang Empress Eugenie's tiara in their living room. That leaves thieves with 3 ugly options. Break everything down, melt the gold, remove the stones. Sell them as raw materials stripped of their history. Hide and wait. Sit on the jewels for years, hoping the heat cools off and a private collector with no questions asked comes along. Work with insurers. Sometimes, insurance companies quietly offer rewards for anonymous returns, a fraction of the value, but safer than trying to fence a famous crowd. A veteran jewel thief interviewed about the Louvre heist summarized it like this. They probably had inside help. You don't pull something like this cold. They can melt the gold, recut the stones, sell everything piece by piece. Or they wait for an insurance payout offer. But the one thing they can't do is sell those crowns the way they are. Everybody in the world knows what they look like. In most museum heists, the first week is critical. If items are found quickly, they're usually intact. After that, the chances collapse. The jewels are often already broken up, melted, or scattered across borders. The estimate on the stolen pieces from the Louvre approached 800 million euros. Every day that passed made it more likely that this value would be reduced to anonymous gold bars and unremarkable gemstones. As of now, the thieves have left behind little beyond their tools and their vehicles. The most important question remains unanswered. Can France catch them before history literally disappears into a smelter? The Louvre heist did more than steal jewels. It shattered an illusion. It proved that even the most protected places on Earth aren't invulnerable, and that a small crew with courage planning and a few power tools can walk straight through layers of modern security if they know exactly where the seams are. Did they have help from the inside? Have the jewels already been destroyed? Will an anonymous tip, a careless brag, or a trace of DNA on a yellow vest eventually crack the case? Right now, no one outside a very small circle truly knows. But one thing is certain. In 7 minutes on a quiet Sunday morning, the Louvre stopped being untouchable. And somewhere out there, a handful of people are sitting on treasure that doesn't just belong to a museum, it belongs to the story of an entire country. You've been watching Obscure Crimes. If you want more deep dives into heists, disappearances, and forgotten investigations from around the world, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, if you stole jewels this famous, what would you do next?